So, I didn't know, as you could tell, I didn't know what to call this, the Proverbs we're going to look. So I just called them interesting Proverbs. I just sort of pulled out some that I thought were kind of interesting and interesting for various reasons. So we've looked at, we kind of grouped looked at some categories and some groupings of Proverbs about particular subjects. These aren't about any one subject necessarily, several different ones, but I just thought that in various ways, these were kind of interesting ones. So this might be a little more lighthearted than some of the other classes, although maybe not, because there's some stuff in here that I think is worth spending time with. But some of these are just kind of, I think, kind of humorous or striking, or they say things in ways that are kind of memorable to us, or that strike us as kind of odd. Some of them I included because they seem to be contradictory, and so we want to talk about what that means when we see two proverbs that seem to contradict one another pretty blatantly. And what does that mean? How do we read those, and how do we understand those, and what do we do when we see something like that? So that's all the setup I have. So we'll just kind of dive into it from there, and might as well start with the first on the list, which is chapter 10. So you can turn to Proverbs 10. We'll look at verse 4, and then we'll look down to verse 22. So Proverbs 10, 4, and then 22. Proverbs 10, 4 says, lazy hands make for poverty, but diligent hands bring wealth. Easy enough proverb to understand, right? We've seen some like it. It's just this idea that, diligently, working diligently, living a life diligently, taking care of your responsibilities, taking care of the things that need to be done, leads to wealth, while if you're lazy, you're going to wind up poor. Now, we've already talked about the fact that Proverbs aren't rules that hold true every time you see them, right? Sometimes they're true over the long term. Sometimes they're true in general ways, but not always in specific ways. So we can always go, well, there's exceptions to that rule, and there are. But the proverb, what the proverb is saying is the wise course of action is to be diligent in your life, be diligent in the things that you do, work hard and with intention, and you'll have gain from it. You'll be blessed. You'll have some gain from that. So there's that side of it, and if you don't, then often what's going to happen is poverty. But then if you look down at verse 22, in comparison, you have the blessing of the Lord brings wealth without painful toil for it. And there's different ways of translating that last clause there, but without painful toil is one pretty good way. And it comes. What comes to your mind when you read the painful toil line? Anything? Does that ring a bell for you? It's the same word that's used when God tells Adam, as a result of his sin, that he will that only with painful toil will he bring food out of the ground. He'll have to work hard. He'll have to work. It'll be painful toil for him to bring food out of the ground. So it's the same word there, which gives you sort of a sense of what maybe is behind that. But how does that compare to what we just read? Verse 4 says, if you're diligent, and work hard, you'll be wealthy. 10:22 says, it's the blessing of the Lord that brings wealth without painful toil for it. So how would you reconcile those verses? How would you interpret those verses together?
If you want to receive the blessing of the Lord, you've got to be a hard worker.
Okay, all right.
That's what the Bible instructs us over and over again, right?
Okay.
Be a worker, be a worker, be a worker. It never tells us to be lazy and just sit around waiting for the Lord to come.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It's the opposite.
Okay, Diana, what were you thinking?
Is it the same word for wealth in both of them? Because
Pretty sure it is, yeah.
It could be that, we have blessings from God are not only money. It's, people can be blessings, and, good health and things like that. So maybe it's more talking about that kind of wealth that we wouldn't measure in terms of money, but other things.
I'm just checking real quick here. I think it's the same word, but I'll double check. Yeah, same word. But yeah, I mean, we do have different ways of thinking about wealth, right? Different ways of talking about it. That this isn't necessarily pointing to financial windfalls as a blessing from God. But I do think that Dan's onto something when he talks about, well, it's kind of both, right?
Mm-hmm.
We kind of all recognize, or I think we recognize that. Sure, we go to work and we try to do our jobs as diligently as possible, but we also give thanks to God for the things we have, right? We kind of recognize that even though you earn money and you try to make good decisions and good choices about your money, you do all these things, but you also recognize that whatever we have comes from God, and the blessings that we enjoy come from Him. So I think, I think kind of what Dan says there is true, that there's both involved, and what we assume as we read these two proverbs together is that that always we want to do our best and be diligent in the things that we do. But we also look to God as the source of our blessings and recognize that everything we have comes from Him. I don't think one of those attitudes cancels out the other. Does that make sense? Both of those attitudes, I think, are important for us. We don't sit back and, well, God, go ahead now, bless me, but we go out, we work, we do the things we need to do. But we also want to be aware and able to see when God has been generous to us and blessed us, and give Him credit for those things.
It's kind of like when the blessings of the Lord bring wealth, it's like we do nothing to receive it. And so when there's a blessing in my life, it's obviously from God. And I think we can be fooled or tricked when we've done work and we've received blessing, from our hands. And so we're not as ready to, and I'm not saying it's true across the board, because people do thank God for the work that they do. But it really is it's a gap there that I know I didn't deserve this, and my goodness, thank you, God. And then when I do work hard and I receive a blessing, it's thank you, God, for giving me the ability to work hard. So God is praised on both ends, but I think it should be, I hate using should, it should be obvious when we've not done things and the blessings just pour in.
Yeah, and that's true as well, right? That sometimes, sometimes we get things we don't deserve, and very often we get things that we haven't worked for, that we haven't, and I think of myself compared to many other people, the phrase, born on third base and you think you hit a triple, that being born on third base can be a blessing from God that we sometimes don't recognize. Right. And we sort of assume that's our right, or that's our, that's what we deserve. But maybe there's many things in our lives that we don't quite deserve like we think we do. And so I think always we need to cultivate that belief, that conviction that what we have comes from God. And if we were able to work for something and earn it, that's great. And God gave us that ability, and God blessed that outcome. And if it just comes into our life as a windfall, we're thankful for that too, and appreciative for his blessings in that way.
You know, Patrick, if the provisions are there, I think we should take that opportunity to work and not be lazy.
Proverbs has a lot about that, right? About lazy. We'll look at another one here in just a second after we talk about this one, because it'll fit well. Proverbs talks a lot about laziness and diligence. That's a real important theme in Proverbs. I think we can go the wrong way with it. I think we can assume sometimes wrongly that people who don't have, don't achieve at the standard we think they should be achieving at, are just, there's something wrong with them. They're lazy. That's not that doesn't necessarily follow. But I think you're right. I think the proverb calls us to be diligent in the responsibilities God gives us and the opportunities He gives us, and to do our best. Paul talks in Colossians about whatever you do, do it with all your heart, all your might, as pleasing the Lord. Everything that we do can be the work of God if we do it in the right way and for the right reasons. There is a lot in Proverbs about that diligence and about not being the person who lays there like a lump while other people work around you and becomes more of a detriment to your family and your community than a blessing.
It makes me also think of the verse that says that God causes it to rain on those that are His and those aren't. And the whole notion that the blessings, that if it's a blessing from the Lord, it's not because we've done it to deserve it or earn it, but that's just who God is. He's just a giving God and allows His blessings to fall on all people. And it just depends on where our faith is at, how we receive it, whether we are arrogant as a result of what we have, or whether we try to emulate Christ with what we have. So it makes me think of that he's not a how do they say that? My grandparents used to say it, I can't pull it up. Respected persons.
Yes, right.
He's not a respected person. He just gives, and His blessings are on all people, and He adds no trouble. That's what my translation said.
Yeah, that's another translation of that last phrase there. Sometimes Hebrew can be a little tricky, and you get a couple of different things that are possible. But I think it's Martin Luther who called that common grace, the grace that everybody gets, right? The grace God gives to everyone. That the rain falls on the just and the unjust, and whether you take rain in the sense of a blessing or raining on your parade, either way, it goes both ways, right? So we thank God for that common grace that we all receive, and try to be as diligent as we can with the things He gives us. But we'll see another one of those sort of contradictions in a minute, and often when you have a contradiction in Proverbs like that, or anywhere in Scripture, you look toward the middle. You look in between them. What's the middle ground between those things, and that's maybe where you want to find some space to stand. Let's look at the one about laziness, because I think it's a really funny one. 26:13. Look at Proverbs 26:13. First of all, what's a sluggard? In Proverbs 26:13.
This is the slothful man.
The slothful man, yeah. A sluggard is a slothful person. What's a slothful person?
A lazy
Hangs
person.
upside down from trees, right? No.
Yeah.
Slothful person is somebody who's lazy, right? Who's sloth-like. They move slow, but they don't do much. and at least that's the way we sort of think of sloths.
They have a sloth at the zoo.
Yeah, right.
Every time you see them, they're just laying.
They're just hanging there, right? They don't do much.
Just kind
of hang out, and So it's an easy way to sort of describe a person who's lazy, a person who doesn't do much, takes every opportunity to relax. And I love this. A sluggard says, "There's a lion in the road, a fierce lion roaming the streets." What's going on there? What's this proverb about? It's a weird little proverb. What's it about?
He's giving an excuse.
He's giving an excuse. I can't go out of the house. I can't leave. I might get eaten by a lion out there. It's supposed to be humorous. It's an exaggeration. But he's giving this excuse for why he can't, do the things he's supposed to do. Why he can't be diligent. Why he can't do the things that God has given him to do. And so he's grasping for any excuse he can come up with to stay in and lock the door and close the windows and probably have a nap. And so there's this exaggerated idea of lazy people are good at coming up with excuses, and maybe you've known some folks who you see that in them, and it's not intended to be judgmental. It's just the fact that sometimes people who have cultivated the habit of laziness have usually cultivated some good excuses too. Again, that doesn't mean that every excuse is invalid. That doesn't mean that everybody who comes up with an excuse for not being able to be at work or not being able to do the things they should do doesn't mean they're lazy or in the wrong. But that's often what happens is people who are lazy come up with all sorts of explanations for why their laziness is the right choice and the only real choice for them. There's a couple more then right immediately following that. As a door turns on its hinges, so a sluggard turns on his bed. That's a real picture. That's a real picture, Espen, right? Just this picture of somebody just kind of lolling around in bed. A sluggard buries his hand in the dish. He's too lazy to bring it back to his mouth. He falls asleep eating. He's too lazy to even eat his food. Right? It's it's that extreme. Obviously, this is an exaggeration. These are all exaggerations. A picture of laziness drawn in ridiculous terms so that you see the point. And then the chief problem in verse 16, a sluggard is wiser in his own eyes than 7 people who answer discreetly. Makes sense to him, right? This is his lifestyle. This is the life he's chosen, and he will excuse it, even if it means saying there's a lion in the road. I'm going to get eaten, and I have to stay in the house. So it's this picture of this extreme laziness that is not going to accomplish you anything, and not gonna, and that's one of the chief problems, right? It's not just we dislike laziness. It's a destructive habit, a destructive pattern. So There's a lot in Proverbs about laziness. Well, here's the one that will get me in trouble. Proverbs 11:22. Like a gold ring in a pig's snout is a beautiful woman who shows no discretion. Now that's just sexist, isn't it? What's going on there? What's going on with that statement? Well, what is discretion? What is the discretion we're talking about here?
Wisdom.
Wisdom. It's the thing Proverbs is about. The discretion we're talking about is wisdom. Now, there may be some specific connotations for this particular word. It could have to do with like moral character and that sort of thing. But the general idea is that this is a picture of someone who does not have wisdom and discretion. And some have even translated it taste. Not meaning like, tasteful clothing, but just they're just no respect for the norms of society, no respect for anybody else, and so what's that like? A beautiful woman with no discretion is like this gold ring and a pig's snout. What's the comparison being made?
It's a waste.
Okay, a waste, right? A waste of something beautiful, right? There's something that's beautiful that and you put it in a pig's snout. Why would you do that? It's very similar to what Jesus says about not throwing your pearls before the swine, right? It's a very similar idea that some things are just wasted on some people. And so somebody without discretion is somebody who, no matter how beautiful, no matter how attractive they are in different ways, no matter how talented, no matter how accomplished, wisdom is so important that it just renders that useless and ugly, whatever it is. And by the way, it's not just about women, and it's not just about physical beauty. It applies in large ways to every human being, right? And we all know people who, they could do so much for the world, and they could do so much for their family or their church if they just had some wisdom, if they just had some discretion. And we don't want to be those people. And that's really what the Proverbs about, right? Don't be that. If that's what you are, stop being that. It's not saying there's only two kinds of people. There's some with wisdom and some without. We can all potentially be foolish and lack discretion. But we can also all potentially have wisdom if we'll just listen and heed it and obey it. And this proverb.
This is not about IQ.
Yeah, it's not.
We always know intelligence and wisdom, but
right.
It's really the right application of intelligence. And you can have a high IQ or a low one and still be wise.
Intelligence can be that gold ring in the pig's snout if you don't have wisdom, right? If you don't have discretion. And the wisdom we're talking about is the moral and character wisdom that God wants us to have.
Patrick.
Yes, ma'am.
I was just going to say, if you have a beautiful character, that doesn't fade.
Right. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. We are in our culture, we're very focused, aren't we, on physical attractiveness or impressive credentials and this proverb reminds us that without the kind of wisdom that God wants us to have, all of that is useless and going to be marred and made unattractive.
Yeah, I don't know if it's in Proverbs or not, but it says somewhere that God looks on the inside, right? We tend to look on the outside. Is that, you remember if that's in Proverbs?
No, it's 2 Samuel talking about
Samuel.
talking about David,
But
and
that applies
when,
here.
when Samuel was
It should be in Proverbs.
when Samuel was and that's a good example. Samuel, looks at all the brothers, right, and the one who least looks like a king is the one that Samuel says that's the guy, and everybody says, why him? And Samuel says, because God.
Yeah.
We look on the outside, God looks on the inside.
Yeah, this is something we need to keep remembering.
Yeah.
I think that's very helpful.
Yeah.
You live in a Christian life, keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Because we fall into that trap, always looking on the outside, and not that we can see everything inside like God can, but we can focus more on a person's inside and see what they're made of more, and look at that more than skin color, whatever, beauty, whatever. And we'll be a lot deeper person ourselves.
Yeah, the discretion we're talking about there is often an inside thing, right? It's about your heart, about your character, and about your thoughts and how you compose your life. And so
the 31st chapter basically concludes, favor is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman that feareth the Lord, she shall be praised.
Yeah.
So that's the discretion is the fear of the Lord.
We're going to look at 30. I want to close out our look at Proverbs by looking at the end of 31. I think that's a real helpful way to. There's a reason that it closes Proverbs, and we'll look at that next week. Yeah, absolutely. That's I think really important. What I like about some of these proverbs is they're humorous, and you kind of chuckle, and then you go, oh yeah, yeah, it kind of catches you by surprise a little bit. It comes in and surprises you, and it's its applicability and in its depth.
Yeah, I think it's the meaning sticks with you a little bit.
Right.
When there's a little humor with it,
Right.
We all need some humor in our lives. Appreciate a good, clean comedian, when we can find one. But there's definitely humor in the Bible,
Yeah.
Part of it.
I was also thinking discreet. I know we're using it as wisdom, but I think also about just being discreet. That I don't flaunt my beauty, or I don't flaunt, misuse the golden ring in the pig snout. That we're discreet in our judgments and how we. So it slows us down with speech. It slows us down with action, and that beauty's there, but we're not flaunting it. We're not acting as though we're the wisest thing on the block, or so I hear all of that, and I agree with, and that's all a part of wisdom, right? To be discreet, to measure your words.
Absolutely. That's what the wisdom is wanting to do in Proverbs. It's wanting to help us to be discreet, help us to have the discretion to say the right thing at the right time in the right way, to not say the right thing at the wrong thing at the wrong time, to choose, to make good choices, make good decisions, to get up and work hard when we'd rather be asleep. All the things that we're talking about. That's the basis for the discretion that we're intended to have. Is this wisdom that God offers?
And this also reminds me of my grandmother. She used to say, pretty ears, pretty does. And she was saying pretty is, but I heard pretty ears. And not until I went to college, I go, what in the world? Pretty
ears.
It is pretty does.
It is pretty, that's pretty does. Yeah. That's sort of the flip side of Forrest Gump, right?
Yes.
Stupid is as stupid does. Is that? I think that was in Forrest Gump. Stupid is as stupid does.
Yeah.
So it's sort of the flip side of that. But yeah, absolutely. What you're going for is not this empty
side. Yeah.
empty attractiveness that we all are often sort of bombarded with, but the discretion that we should be living with. Well, a similar one is actually repeated twice in Proverbs 21:9 and 25:24. So you know it's important if it's repeated twice. And it's another of my favorites. Better to live on a corner of the roof than share a house with a quarrelsome wife. And I'm going to say right off the bat, this is not just about wives. This is also about husbands. This is about co-workers. This is about fellow students. It's about people you go to church with. It's about friends. It's about your roommate. This covers a lot of ground. Because what's it say? What's the comparison? That's always the question in Proverbs. What is the comparison?
Yeah, it's about contentiousness. The woman here, pictured as a woman, is contentious. I have a note here, it says, be contentious if you want to ruin relationships. I think that's probably what it's about.
Okay.
It makes me think you might as well live alone.
Exactly. That's exactly right. It's the picture is the flat roof, and maybe you've seen pictures. The flat roof and Colette's going, no way, I'm scared of heights. But the flat roof in the ancient Near East, where
it's even worse than just living alone. It's like you're out there in the elements.
now maybe there's a guest room. There's in 1 Kings and 2 Kings with Elijah and Elisha. There's the idea of building a guest room up on the top of the roof for the prophet. They can come and stay there when they visit.
But then if you look at 27:15, it says a quarrelsome wife is like a dripping, leaky roof in a rainstorm.
Yeah. So
I get the elements.
Yeah.
Like
But the point is right either way. It's rather to live all by yourself on the corner of the roof than to be in the house with someone who's, and by the way, quarrelsome is what the NIV says. I think that is a little bit of a disservice to the word. Dan has contentious, I think you said contentious, which is not a word we use very much, but what does contentious mean? Argumentative, which is, similar to quarrelsome, but I mean, really there's a connotation of more like almost abusiveness to the word. It's not just, sometimes people quote this when their wife has an opinion. That's not the point of this verse, right? That's not the point of this verse, that your wife has an opinion and it disagrees with yours.
The old version says a brawling woman.
Brawling is maybe even a better way to put it. It really is. It's a little more serious than just, someone of strong opinions. This is somebody who goes out of their way to make life miserable, and it's just better to steer clear and just not be part of that, not buy into that at all. It's a proverb about, what's the best life you want to live? Well, try not to shackle yourself to the people who are going to make your life miserable. Try not to shackle yourself. You got to deal with people all the time who are difficult, right? We all have to do that, but you don't have to live with them. You don't have to be friends with them. You don't have to shackle yourself to them if they're just going to make life miserable for you. So it's not about what do you do when you get into relationships so much as how do you stay out of those kind of relationships? How do you avoid those kinds of relationships? It's not telling you to move out if your wife's difficult to live with or your husband's difficult to live with necessarily. It's just saying, this is not the life you want. This is a life you want to avoid at all costs.
Be careful who you marry too.
Be careful who you marry. Be careful who you go into business with. Be careful who who you tie yourself to in whatever way. You don't want that person to be somebody who's just going to make life miserable for you, so that you want to go up on the roof and maybe jump off if it gets that bad. You know, it's just a person who's going to drive you to misery. And we know that there are people like that we deal with in our lives. And Proverbs is unflinching about the fact that not everybody is great. And the people who aren't, you don't need to shackle yourself to. You try to help them when you can. It's not saying cut them adrift, but you don't have to shackle yourself to them. And I think there's some real wisdom there for us, knowing the difference. Well, let's see. What are some others I like here? How about 26:17? There were several in chapter 26 that I liked. Well, before that, let's look at 26:4 and 5. This is one of those contradictory, two of those contradictory ones that come right behind each one another, which tells you maybe there's some intention here. But it says, chapter 26, verse 4, do not answer a fool according to his folly, or you yourself will be just like him. So let's hold on and let's take that one. What's that say? Do not answer a fool according to his folly, or you yourself will be just like him.
Don't get involved with ridiculous arguments that we have no control over.
Yeah, I think of this proverb on social media every time I see somebody arguing about something. Just comment after comment, arguing about something silly, and I always think of this: don't answer according to his folly. You'll be just like you just get sucked in, right? You just get sucked into these silly arguments that mean nothing, that are going to make, and you're not going to convince him or her. You're not going to change them, and you wind up getting into this argument that you're saying to yourself, how did I ever get into this? How did this even happen? Yeah, I think that's a pretty good approximation of what's going on here. So then, as soon as you're all good with that, then you look at the next verse. Answer a fool according to his folly, or he will be wise in his own eyes. So which is it? Do you answer a fool according to his folly, or do you not?
You do not. I think it's trying to say you don't get down on their lower level. You stay out of the fray. Don't let them pull you into the mud. Like a pig, might want to pull you into their pen,
And then what about verse 5? And then what about verse 5?
This is where we need to be discreet.
Yeah, we need to have some discretion here, right? Yeah.
Yes, sometimes we say nothing and sometimes we say something.
And you gotta know when, right? You gotta be able to know when. So when might you need to answer a fool according to his folly? Let's think through that a minute. When might you need to? I think we understand there are many times where you just go, that's not even worth the time and the effort. But there are some times when you might need to. When might you need to?
Well, I got a note here. It says, listen with your ears first and your heart also. So, in other words, discern what he's saying.
Okay.
She's saying, before you decide to speak.
Okay.
Maybe you'll decide to get into it. Maybe you'll back off.
Okay. So, always important.
Good advice.
What do they say? What is this person saying? What do they really get? So once you know that, how do you know which you do?
I think too, if it's leading others astray, that's one thing. I think if it's egregious and it's harming the individual, especially if they're family members, you say something.
Yeah. So if you see somebody being led on a destructive course of action by somebody else, maybe you speak up.
Maybe don't.
Maybe you say,
Maybe.
you know, wait, let's
Say adios.
let's rethink this.
Adios, amigo. I'm
Well,
out of here.
yeah, I think the Proverbs together, and again, the fact is, you know, God just didn't like throw out a bunch of mixed proverbs and they just happened to land together, right? These are one after the other for a reason. There are times where you don't argue, and there are times when it's important that you do, and you've got to be able to know the difference. And I think what you say, Colette, very often is going to have to do with, is somebody being hurt? Is somebody being damaged? Is somebody being deceived? Is this a destructive thing that could hurt someone else? You speak up. If somebody's, you know, if somebody's harmed by the words, you speak up. You're not going to talk a racist out of his racism, probably. But if somebody's being hurt by their words, you need to say something, right? You're maybe not going to convince somebody who's teaching something false about Jesus that they're wrong, but if somebody's being hurt by it, injured by it spiritually, you might need to say something. You might need to speak up. So yeah, there are times we know that we need to say something. There are times that we know that it's not worth it, and God asks us to have the discretion to know the difference.
Yeah, that will probably come with age and experience. So I would say a younger person probably would know how to handle it. Just out of high school or something.
I know some younger people who are very discreet with their words and handle that very well. And I know older people who don't do so well with it myself. Yeah.
You would think people get wiser with age, but you're right, they don't always work that way. But that's really sad when that doesn't.
Other thoughts about that? Well, let's look at 26:17, and then maybe we'll also have time for one more. 26:17. I like this one because it's another vivid one. Like one who grabs a stray dog by the ears is someone who rushes into a quarrel not their own. What's that comparison?
Not a very wise thing to do. You're going to get bitten.
That's right. That's exactly, any dog probably, but for certainly the picture in the ancient Near East, people didn't keep dogs as pets. Dogs were, roamed in packs and scavenged, and so this wasn't a cuddly little. This wasn't Lyndon Johnson's beagle who you could pick up by their ears, right? This is something a little different, and if you pick it up by the ears, it's probably going to take a chunk at it, and
you're gonna get bit.
And that's what happens sometimes when you get into quarrels not your own. Somebody takes a chunk at it, and Proverbs is just saying, you know what? Sometimes you just need to say, that's your business. That's not mine. One of the things that I think this assumes is how much we like to have people on our side. Mm. And there'll be Colette's nodding her head. I'm sure your profession, you probably hear that a lot. You probably have that a lot. Somebody comes to you and says, so and so did this, and isn't that terrible? And wants to enlist you on their side, and sometimes you get sort of sucked in, and again, there are times when you need to be there for someone, and you need to help them and defend them. But there are a lot of times where maybe we don't need to involve ourselves in other people's quarrels, and it's just not going to go well, and we just need to have some discretion and stay away from some of those situations.
That's right, because they can turn on you.
That's right.
And I've seen that.
And there's times to call for help,
Yeah.
That's a judgment call right there, I guess, to me. You get into some domestic, violence or something going on, and they turn a gun on you. It's the worst kind of violence. It happens in Chicago, unfortunately, about every day, but hopefully we never get involved in something like that, but.
Well,
Come across it.
you know, and even things that are less serious than that can become a problem. Church fights erupt, church divisions erupt sometimes for no other reason than people get enlisted on one side or the other of a personal squabble. Happens all the time.
But they don't just get violent.
Happens in, no, but it doesn't have to be violent. Happens in offices, happens in every relationship. People enlist somebody on either side, and you wind up, you know, just creating a mess. And Proverbs says, don't do that. Know when to stay out of a quarrel. Know when to stay out of a fight.
Yeah.
Well, I love 27:14. I'll just mention this one. If anyone loudly blesses their neighbor early in the morning, it will be taken as a curse. That's just one for those of you who like to sleep in a little bit, or maybe more for those of you who like to get up early and make a lot of noise. There's you know, even a blessing at the wrong time of day can be taken as a curse. And maybe we can finish with 23, 10, and 11. Do not move an ancient boundary stone or encroach on the fields of the fatherless, for their defender is strong. He will take up their case against you. What's going on here? What's envisioned? Moving an ancient boundary stone, that doesn't seem like something that any of us would have an opportunity even to do. What's going on here?
Taking other people's property.
Taking other people's property, right? It's moving the property line. It's playing with the survey so that part of somebody else's property becomes yours. My dad has this gully in his backyard between him and his neighbor, and he used to mow right down to the middle of that gully. When his neighbor moved, the new guy came in, had a survey done, and came and told Dad one day, actually, my property line goes past the gully. So Dad had been mowing the neighbor's grass, that's not a big deal. But the big deal is when you take that boundary stone and you move it so that you gain something from it. Remember, in Israel, property was basically assigned by God to tribes and to families, and you didn't want to mess with that. You didn't want to fool with it. The defender here that's mentioned, NIV capitalizes defender because they're assuming God, and I think that's a safe assumption. But the word is redeemer, and it's the idea of the kinsman, the next of kin, that is responsible for making right injustices in their family and injustices done to a member of their family. And God is pictured as the redeemer of the fatherless, the people who are most likely to be abused, an orphan, a widow, somebody who didn't have anybody to fight for them. They're the most likely to be taken advantage of. But God takes up his case against those who would cheat them and move that boundary stone. So it's about justice. It's about fairness. It's about making sure that we're treating one another in an above board way. Always going out of our way, maybe, to make sure that we're treating one another justly. Well, other thoughts?
And just on that, Leslie, early in the morning, I had a boss named Mr. Adam, and he had a secretary. And she used to go into his office early in the morning oh, hi, Mr. Adam, how are you? It's a great day. And those of us who knew him knew he didn't want to see anybody early.
He was not a morning person, right?
That's cringing, probably.
That's right.
Behind his desk.
She was not showing discretion, right?
You have to be sensitive to other people.
Yeah, right. And you know what you want them to hear might not be what they hear if you're not careful.
Yeah, you think he would have wrote her a note or something? I think this was not so early.
Lock his door.
Yeah.
Maybe she got the hint later. Sure, she meant well.
Well, good to see everyone. Thank you for your thoughts and your time. Good to be together. And hope you guys all have a great week.
You too, Patrick. Good night, everybody.
Good night.